Sometimes life has a way of throwing you curveballs when you least expect them. I thought I was just going to fix a broken water heater on a crisp October morning in Millbrook, Ohio. What I didn't know was that I was about to stumble into one of the most unexpected conversations of my life, one that would completely change how I see loneliness, connection, and what it really means to be there for someone. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Mike, and I'm 32 years old. I've been working as a plumber and general repair guy here in Millbrook for about 8 years now. Ever since I moved back home after my dad passed away, people around here know me as the guy who shows up when your pipes burst at 2 in the morning or when your water heater decides to call it quits right before Thanksgiving. I drive a beat-up white van that's seen better days, filled with tools that have become extensions of my hands and enough spare parts to rebuild half the plumbing in this town. Millbrook isn't much to look at from the outside. It's one of those small Ohio towns where everybody knows everybody else's business, where the local diner serves as the unofficial town hall, and where a broken water heater can become the talk of the neighborhood faster than you can say no hot water. The houses here are mostly older colonials and ranches, built back when people expected things to last forever. Most of them do, but when they break, they really break. That particular Tuesday started like any other. The leaves were turning those brilliant shades of orange and red that make autumn in Ohio feel like something out of a postcard. There was that crisp bite in the air that lets you know winter's coming whether you're ready or not. I had just finished replacing a garbage disposal for Mrs. Peterson on Maple Street when my phone buzzed with a new call. The voice on the other end was soft, almost hesitant. "Hi, is this Mike? Ex-Plumbing and Repair. I got your number from Tom next door. My water heater isn't working, and I really need someone to take a look at it today if possible." I could hear something in her voice that went beyond just needing hot water. There was a kind of urgency there, mixed with what sounded like embarrassment about having to call a stranger for help. I've been doing this long enough to recognize the difference between someone who's just inconvenienced and someone who's genuinely struggling. "That's me," I said, pulling out my appointment book. "What's your name and address? I can probably swing by this afternoon." Linda Morrison. "I'm at 142 Elm Street, the blue colonial with the white shutters, and thank you so much." No, it's short notice. There was something about the way she said thank you that stuck with me. It wasn't just polite gratitude. It was the kind of thanks you give someone when you've been trying to handle everything yourself for so long that asking for help feels like admitting defeat. I pulled up to 142 Elm Street around 2:30 that afternoon. The house was exactly as she'd described. A modest 2-story colonial painted a soft blue with white shutters that had seen better days, but still gave the place a welcoming feel. The front yard was neat and tidy, with flower beds that looked like they'd been carefully tended to, even as the season was winding down. There was a small orange tabby cat sitting on the front porch, watching me with that judgmental look that only cats can pull off. Linda opened the door before I even had a chance to knock. She was probably around 48, with shoulder-length brown hair that had hints of gray. She wasn't trying to hide in kind brown eyes that seemed to carry more weight than they should have. She was wearing a simple sweater and jeans, the kind of clothes that said she valued comfort over fashion but still cared about looking presentable. "You must be Mike," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "I'm Linda. Thank you so much for coming out on such short notice." The house had that lived-in feeling that comes from years of making a place truly home. Family photos lined the hallway, and I could smell something that might have been homemade bread or cookies baking somewhere in the kitchen. Everything was clean and organized, but not in that sterile way that makes you afraid to touch anything. This was a house where someone actually lived, not just existed. "No problem at all," I said, setting down my toolbox. "Where's the water heater? Basement?" "Yes, right this way." Linda led me through the kitchen and down a narrow staircase into the basement. "It just stopped working yesterday. It's no hot water at all." I tried calling a few other places, but everyone said they couldn't get out here until next week. The basement was finished, but clearly used more for storage than living space. Boxes were neatly stacked along one wall, and there was a small workshop area with tools that looked like they hadn't been used in a while. The water heater sat in the far corner, a standard electric unit that looked to be about 10 years old. I crouched down next to it, checking the connections and testing the power supply. "When did you first notice there was no hot water?" "Yesterday morning," Linda said, hovering nearby but trying not to crowd me while I worked. I thought maybe it was just taking longer to heat up, but by evening it was still cold. I opened up the access panel and immediately spotted the problem. The heating element had burned out completely, and from the looks of it, the thermostat wasn't far behind. This wasn't going to be a quick fix. "Well, I've got good news and bad news," I said, standing up and wiping my hands on a rag. "The good news is, I know exactly what's wrong. The bad news is, I'm going to need to order some parts. The heating element is shot, and I think we should replace the thermostat while we're at it." Linda's face fell slightly. "How long will that take? I can probably get the parts by Thursday, maybe Friday at the latest." "I know that's not ideal, especially with the weather getting colder." No, that's fine," she said quickly, though. I could tell it wasn't really fine. I could manage until then. There was something about the way she said it that made me pause. Most people would complain about being without hot water for several days, especially heading into colder weather. But Linda just accepted it with a resignation that seemed practiced, like she was used to making do with less than ideal situations. "Is there somewhere else you can shower in the meantime?" I asked. "Family nearby? Or maybe a gym membership?" Linda shook her head. "I'll figure something out." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Maybe I can heat water on the stove for now." I felt a pang of sympathy. Heating water on the stove for basic needs like washing dishes and bathing was something people did out of necessity, not choice. And the way she said she'd figure it out suggested she was used to solving problems on her own. "Let me make some calls," I said. "Maybe I can rush the parts order. Get them here by tomorrow afternoon." "You don't have to do that," Linda said, but there was hope in her voice. "It's no trouble. Part of the service." As I was packing up my tools, getting ready to head out and start making those calls, Linda cleared her throat softly. "Mike, can I ask you something?" "Sure. What's on your mind?" She was quiet for a moment, looking down at her hands. When she looked back up, there was something vulnerable in her expression that caught me off guard. "I hope this doesn't sound strange, but how old do you think I am?" The question threw me. In 8 years of doing this job, I had been asked a lot of things. Could I fix this? How much would it cost? How long would it take? But I'd never been asked to guess someone's age, especially not in the context of a repair. "Job, I don't know," I said honestly. "Mid-40s, maybe?" 48, she said, as if the number carried some significance I wasn't grasping. 48 years old. I waited, sensing there was more coming but not wanting to push. "Do you think that's old?" she asked. "Old for what?" Linda was quiet again, and I could see her wrestling with something. The silence stretched between us, broken only by the hum of the furnace kicking on upstairs. "For someone to want to be close to you," she said finally, so quietly I almost didn't hear her. The words hung in the basement air like a confession she'd been carrying around for too long. I realized I was witnessing something I hadn't expected when I'd agreed to fix her water heater. This wasn't just about broken appliances and heating elements. This was about something much deeper, much more personal. "I don't think 48 is old for anything," I said carefully, not sure where this conversation was headed, but wanting to be honest. Linda nodded, but she still looked troubled. I keep telling myself that, but sometimes I wonder if the world sees it differently. Before I could respond, there was a knock at the front door upstairs. Linda's expression immediately shifted, like she was pulling herself back from whatever vulnerable place she'd been visiting. "That's probably Tom from next door," she said, heading toward the stairs. "He likes to check on me when he sees service trucks in the driveway." I followed her upstairs, still processing the unexpected turn our conversation had taken.
Ow.
The front window, I could see a man in his 50s standing on the porch. Wearing a flannel shirt and looking like he belonged in a Norman Rockwell painting of small-town America, Linda opened the door with a smile that seemed forced. "Hi, Tom." "Hey there, Linda. Saw the plumber's van and wanted to make sure everything was okay. Water heater acting up? Just need some parts, I said, introducing myself. Should have it fixed by the end of the week. Tom nodded approvingly. Good, good. Can't have you going without hot water, especially with winter coming. He looked at Linda with genuine concern. You need anything in the meantime? Janet's making a big pot of soup tonight. We could bring some over. That's very sweet, but I'm fine, Linda said. And I was starting to recognize that phrase as her default response to offers of help. Tom lingered for a moment, clearly wanting to do more, but not sure what. Well, you know where we are if you need anything. After he left, Linda turned to me with a slightly embarrassed smile. Tom and Janet are wonderful neighbors. They've been looking out for me since my divorce was finalized 2 years ago. That explained some things. The way she'd accepted the repair timeline without complaint, the practiced independence, the question about being 48, and whether that was too old for closeness. Divorce, especially later in life, had a way of making people question everything about themselves and their worth. They seem like good people, I said. They are. This whole neighborhood is full of good people. Sometimes I think they worry about me more than they should. Maybe they worry because they care. Linda considered this. Maybe it's just hard to accept help sometimes, you know? I spent so many years having someone else make decisions, handle things, take care of everything. Learning to do it all myself has been important. I understood that. Independence after dependence was something you had to earn back, piece by piece. Well, I should get going and track down those parts, I said, picking up my toolbox. I'll call you as soon as I know when I can get back out here. Thank you, Mike. Really, not just for the water heater, but for listening. I don't know why I said what I said down there. I hope it didn't make you uncomfortable. It didn't, I said, and I meant it. Sometimes we all need someone to listen. As I walked back to my van, I found myself thinking about Linda's question. Was 48 too old for someone to want to be close to you? It seemed like such a sad question for anyone to have to ask, but I was beginning to understand that loneliness after divorce, especially for women, came with its own set of doubts and fears. The orange tabby cat was still on the porch, watching me load my tools. He meowed once, as if offering commentary on the afternoon's events. Yeah, I know, I said to the cat. Life's complicated. As I drove away from Elm Street, I realized this job had already become more than just fixing a water heater. Linda's question was going to stick with me. I had a feeling that when I came back with those parts, we'd be fixing more than just her hot water supply. I managed to track down the water heater parts by Wednesday evening, a full day earlier than I'd promised Linda. The supply house in Columbus had exactly what I needed. The drive gave me time to think about our conversation in her basement. There was something about the way she'd asked that question about being 48 that I couldn't shake. It wasn't just curiosity or small talk. It was the kind of question that comes from a place of real doubt, real pain. Thursday morning arrived gray and drizzly, the kind of October day that makes you want to stay in bed with a cup of coffee and forget the world exists. But I had a job to do, and honestly, I was looking forward to seeing Linda again. Not in any romantic way, but there was something about her quiet strength mixed with vulnerability that made me want to help beyond just fixing her appliance. I pulled into her driveway around 9 o'clock, noticing that the orange tabby was in his usual spot on the porch, seemingly unaffected by the light rain. The house looked different in the gray morning light, more subdued but somehow more honest too. Through the kitchen window I could see Linda moving around, probably making breakfast or coffee. She answered the door wearing a different sweater. Today, this one a deep green that brought out her eyes. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she looked like she'd been up for a while. "Mike, you're early," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "I wasn't expecting you until this afternoon. Got lucky with the parts," I said, shaking the rain off my jacket. "Figured you'd want your hot water back as soon as possible." "Have no idea," Linda said with a laugh that sounded more genuine than her smiles from yesterday. "I tried heating water on the stove for a bath last night. Let's just say it wasn't the relaxing experience I was hoping for. The kitchen smelled like fresh coffee and something sweet, maybe cinnamon rolls. It was the kind of smell that made a house feel like a home, warm and welcoming despite the dreary weather outside." "Coffee's fresh if you want some," Linda offered. Already reaching for a mug, That would be great. Thanks. She poured me a cup, and I noticed her hands were steadier today, more confident. Sometimes a good night's sleep and the promise of a solution can make all the difference in how someone carries themselves. So what's the damage going to be? She asked, leading me back toward the basement stairs. Parts and labor, probably. Around 300. The heating element wasn't cheap, but it should last you another 10 years easily. Linda nodded, and I could see her doing quick mental math. $300 wasn't going to break the bank. But it wasn't pocket change either, especially for someone managing finances on their own for the first time in years. We headed down to the basement, and I got to work immediately. The repair itself was straightforward, but it required draining the tank completely and then refilling it, which meant we had some time to kill while the system cycled through. This is going to take about an hour to heat up properly, I explained. Wiping my hands on my work rag, I can stick around to make sure everything's working correctly, or I can come back later to check on it. Would you mind staying? Linda asked. I mean, if you don't have other appointments. I'd feel better knowing it's working properly before you leave. No problem at all. I'd blocked out the whole morning for this job. We settled into the small seating area she had set up in one corner of the basement. It was cozy in an unexpected way, with a comfortable chair and a small table stacked with books and magazines. A space heater hummed quietly in the corner, taking the chill out of the air. This is nice, I said, looking around. Feels like a reading nook. It is, actually. I come down here sometimes when I need quiet, especially in the evenings when the house feels too big upstairs. Something wistful in the way she said it. And I realized this basement space might be her refuge from loneliness as much as anything else. How long have you lived here? I asked. 15 years. We bought it when Sarah was in high school. Linda paused, then corrected herself. I mean, when my daughter Sarah was in high school. She's 26 now, lives in Chicago, married last year. The way she said we, and then caught herself, told me everything. I needed to know about how fresh this single life still felt to her. Chicago's not too far. Do you get to see her much? A few times a year. She's busy with her new life, new husband, new job, which is how it should be. Linda's voice carried that mix of pride and sadness that comes with watching your children grow up and move on. Still hard, though, I bet. Harder than I expected. When you're married, you don't realize how much of your social life revolves around your spouse's friends, your couple friends. When that's gone, you discover you don't have as many people in your corner as you thought. I nodded, understanding more about her situation. Divorce didn't just end a marriage. It often ended entire social circles, especially in small towns, where everyone knew everyone. What about work? You have colleagues you're close to? Linda worked as a bookkeeper for a small accounting firm downtown, she told me. Nice people, but it was a small office, and everyone pretty much kept to themselves. She'd been there for 12 years, had started part-time when Sarah was still at home, and worked her way up to full-time after the divorce. It's steady work, and I'm good at it, she said. But it's not exactly a social environment. Most days I talk to more numbers than people. As we sat there talking, I found myself really listening to her story. Linda wasn't just lonely. She was isolated in a way that had crept up on her gradually. 15 years of marriage followed by 2 years of rebuilding a life from scratch. Learning to be alone in a house that still held memories of being a family home. Can I ask you something? Linda said after a comfortable silence. Of course. She was quiet for a moment, seeming to gather courage for whatever she wanted to say. When she looked at me, there was that same vulnerability I'd seen yesterday, but stronger now. Yesterday, when I asked you about being 48, what I really wanted to ask was something else, something that's been bothering me for months. Now, I waited, sensing this was the real conversation we'd been building toward. I haven't been held by anyone in over 3 years, she said. The words coming out in a rush like she had to say them quickly or not at all. Not romantically, not as a friend, not even a proper hug from someone who wasn't family. And I keep wondering if that's pathetic. If I'm pathetic, the question hit me like a physical blow. Not because it was inappropriate or uncomfortable, but because of the raw honesty in it. Here was someone who had been carrying this burden of loneliness. This fear that her basic human need for connection was somehow shameful. Linda, I said carefully, wanting to be held, wanting physical connection. That's not pathetic. That's human. But at my age, after a divorce, shouldn't I be past needing that kind of comfort? Why would you be past it? When did we decide? That needing comfort and connection has an expiration date? She laughed, but it was a shaky sound. I don't know. I guess when you're married for 22 years, you take for granted that someone will always be there. Someone to hug you when you've had a bad day. Someone to hold your hand during a scary movie. Someone to just be close to when the world feels too big and cold. And now, I go to bed alone every night in a house that's too quiet. Up alone every morning. I come home from work to an empty house. And sometimes I just want someone to hold me and tell me it's going to be okay, even if it's just for a few minutes. The honesty in her voice was devastating. I'd never heard someone articulate loneliness quite like that before, and it made me realize how much I took for granted in my own life. Have you thought about dating? I asked gently. Linda sighed. I've tried. I signed up for one of those dating apps 6 months ago, went on 3 dates. The first guy spent the entire evening talking about his ex-wife and how much alimony he was paying. The second guy was clearly looking for someone to take care of him, not be with him. The third guy was nice enough, but when he walked me to my door, he kissed me, and I realized I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to be kissed by someone who didn't know me, who didn't care about me. That sounds like normal dating struggles. Doesn't mean you should give up. Maybe, but Mike, I'm 48. I have stretch marks and gray hair and a body that's not what it used to be. I have baggage from a marriage that didn't work out. I have a routine and habits and a life that's already set. What man my age wants to deal with all of that when there are younger women out there who don't come with so much history? Could hear the self-doubt in every word, the way she'd internalize messages about aging and worth that our society seems determined to drill into women. I think you're selling yourself short, I said. And I think you're selling men short too. Most of us who are worth anything aren't looking for someone without history. We're looking for someone whose history makes them interesting. Someone who knows who they are. You really believe that? I do. Linda, you're intelligent, kind, funny, and you've got your life together. You own a beautiful home. You've raised a daughter who's successful enough to live in Chicago and get married. You've survived a divorce and come out stronger. That's not baggage. That's life experience. She was quiet for a long moment, considering my words. Upstairs, I could hear the water heater cycling on, the sound of the heating element doing its job. I should probably check on that, I said, standing up.
Mike, wait. I turned back to her. Thank you for listening, for not making me feel like a fool for asking those questions.
You're not a fool, Linda. You're someone who's been through something hard and is trying to figure out how to be happy again. That takes courage. We went upstairs together, and I tested the hot water at the kitchen sink. It ran clear and hot, exactly as it should. Perfect, I said. You're all set. As I was packing up my tools, Linda disappeared into another room and came back with a check already written out. Here's your payment. And I added a little extra for coming out early and staying to make sure everything worked. You didn't need to do that? I wanted to. You've been more than just a repairman today. I was loading my van when Tom appeared from next door, carrying a small covered dish. How'd it go? He asked. Linda, get her hot water back? All fixed. Should be good for years. Excellent. Janet made extra lasagna last night. I was just taking some over to Linda. She's been having a rough time lately, and we worry about her. Rough time how? Tom glanced around, making sure we weren't overheard. Since the divorce, she's been pretty isolated. Doesn't socialize. Much doesn't seem to have many friends. We try to include her in things, but she always politely declines. We just want her to know she's not alone, you know? I nodded, understanding even more now about Linda's situation. She had caring neighbors, but she was still struggling with accepting help, accepting community. She seems like a good person, I said. She is. One of the best. Just wish she could see that in herself. As I drove home that morning, I couldn't stop thinking about Linda's confession. The raw honesty of someone admitting they hadn't been held in 3 years. The vulnerability of asking if that made them pathetic. It had shaken something loose in me, made me think about loneliness in a way I never had before. I also couldn't stop thinking about what Tom had said. Linda was surrounded by people who cared about her, but she was still alone. Sometimes the hardest part of loneliness isn't the absence of people. It's the inability to let people in when they're right there waiting. That evening, I found myself wondering if there was more I could do. Not romantically, but as a friend, as someone who had been trusted with her honesty. The water heater was fixed, but maybe there were other things in her life that needed attention. And maybe, just maybe, I could help her see that accepting help didn't make her weak. It made her human. 3 days later, I found myself thinking about Linda while working on a kitchen remodel across town. It wasn't unusual for me to remember clients after a job was done, but something about our conversation kept pulling at me. The way she'd opened up about her loneliness, her honest question about not being held in years, it had lodged itself in my mind like a splinter I couldn't quite remove. I was installing a new garbage disposal when my phone rang. Linda's name appeared on the screen, and I felt an unexpected flutter of concern. "Hi, Mike. I hope I'm not bothering you at work." "Not at all. What's going on? Everything okay with the water heater?" "Oh, yes. It's working perfectly. Actually, that's sort of why I'm calling. I have a small leak under my kitchen sink, and I was wondering if you might be able to take a look at it sometime this week. I know it's probably something simple, but I'd rather have someone who knows what they're doing check it out." I could hear something in her voice that wasn't quite right. Not panic, but a kind of forced casualness that made me suspect this wasn't just about a leaky pipe. "Sure, I can swing by tomorrow afternoon if that works for you. That would be perfect. Thank you so much." The next day was Friday, and the afternoon had that crisp, clean feeling that October sometimes delivers like a gift. The leaves were in full color now, and Linda's street looked like something from a magazine. I pulled up to her house and immediately noticed she was waiting for me on the front porch, wearing a light jacket and looking more put together than she had during our previous visits. "Right on time," she said, walking down to meet me. "Really appreciate you coming out again, no problem. Where's this leak?" "What?" We went inside and she led me to the kitchen sink. I got down on my knees and opened the cabinet doors, expecting to find a dripping pipe or loose connection. Instead, everything looked perfectly dry. "I don't see any water damage," I said, running my hand along the pipes. "Where exactly did you notice the leak?" Linda was quiet for a moment. When I looked up at her from under the sink, she had that same vulnerable expression I'd seen in the basement a few days earlier. "There isn't really a leak," she admitted quietly. I sat back on my heels, waiting for her to explain. "I just wanted to see you again. To talk to someone who listened, who didn't make me feel broken for admitting I was lonely." She paused, looking embarrassed. "I'm sorry. Shouldn't have made up a reason to call you. I just didn't know how else to ask." Instead of being annoyed, I felt something soften in my chest. The fact that she'd been thinking about our conversation too, that she'd felt comfortable enough to reach out, even if she'd had to invent a reason, told me something important about the connection we'd made. "You don't need to make up reasons," I said, standing up and closing the cabinet doors. "If you want to talk, just ask." "Really? Really?"
Ow.
"How about we start with some of that coffee you make? It's better than anything I can get at the diner downtown." Linda's whole demeanor changed. Tension in her shoulders relaxed, and for the first time since I'd known her, she smiled without any reservation behind it. "I actually made apple cider this morning," she said. "Would you like some?" I was experimenting with a new recipe. We settled at her kitchen table with steaming mugs of cider that tasted like autumn in liquid form. The orange tabby, who I'd learned was named Rusty, made his way inside and was now perched on the windowsill, watching birds in the backyard with intense focus. "So what's really going on?" I asked. Linda wrapped her hands around her mug and looked out the window. "I've been thinking about what you said the other day, about not selling myself short, about men looking for someone with life experience rather than someone without history. And I realized I don't even know how to meet someone like that. I don't know where people my age go to connect with each other. When I was in my 20s, you met people at bars, or through friends, or at work. But I don't drink much, My work friends are all married or significantly older than me, and my married friends don't really know any single men to introduce me to. I nodded, understanding the challenge. Small-town dating after divorce was particularly tricky, especially when you'd been out of the game for over 2 decades. Have you thought about activities, volunteer work, classes, that sort of thing? I looked into it. There's a book club at the library, but it's mostly women in their 70s. There's a hiking group, but they meet at 6 in the morning on Saturdays, and I'm not sure I'm ready for that level of commitment. She laughed softly. I signed up for a cooking class at the community center, but it turned out to be mostly couples wanting to learn to cook together. What about church? I stopped going after the divorce. Too many questions, too much sympathy, and honestly, too many reminders of when I used to go with my ex-husband. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both of us thinking, outside. The afternoon light was starting to fade, giving everything a golden glow that made the kitchen feel warm and safe. You know what I said? Maybe you're approaching this backwards. What do you mean? Maybe instead of trying to find someone to date, you should focus on finding your community first. Making friends, getting involved in things you actually enjoy, building a social circle. The rest might follow naturally. Linda considered this. But how do I make friends at my age? It's not like school where you're thrown together with people and friendships just happen. It's harder, but it's not impossible. What do you actually enjoy doing? Reading, obviously. Cooking, when I have someone to cook for. I used to love gardening, but I kind of gave up on it after the divorce. Felt like too much work for just me. She paused. I like helping people. I used to volunteer at the food bank before everything got complicated. Why did you stop? My ex-husband thought it was a waste of time. Said I should focus on taking care of our family instead of strangers. The bitterness in her voice was subtle, but unmistakable. Well, he's not making those decisions for you anymore. No, he's not. Linda looked at me with something like surprise, as if she'd forgotten that basic fact. Just then, there was a knock at the front door. Linda glanced at the clock and frowned. I'm not expecting anyone. She went to answer it, and I heard voices from the front hallway. A woman's voice, concerned and slightly impatient. Linda, I've been calling you for 2 days. Why haven't you answered your phone? I'm sorry, Karen. I didn't realize you'd called. Linda returned to the kitchen, followed by a woman who looked to be about her age, with short gray hair and worried eyes. She was carrying a casserole dish, and looked like she'd been expecting to find Linda in some kind of crisis. The woman said, stopping short when she saw me. I didn't realize you had company. Karen, this is Mike. He's the plumber. Who fixed my water heater? Mike, this is my sister Karen. Karen set down the casserole dish and gave me a polite but assessing look. Nice to meet you. I brought dinner because I thought Linda might be having one of her rough days. There was something loaded in the way she said rough days, and I could see Linda's face flush slightly. That's very thoughtful, Linda said. But I'm doing fine. We were just talking. Talking. Karen's eyebrows went up. About plumbing? About life? I said simply. Karen looked between us, clearly trying to figure out what was going on. Well, I don't want to interrupt anything. Linda, can I talk to you for a minute? 2 women stepped into the hallway, but I could hear their whispered conversation. From the kitchen, Linda, what's going on? You don't usually have men over? He's not just any man. He's become a friend. It's friend. Linda, you barely know him. He listens to me, Karen. He doesn't treat me like I'm broken or pitiable. I don't treat you like that. Yes, you do. You bring me casseroles and check on me like I'm an invalid. You worry about me constantly. I appreciate it, I do. But sometimes, I just want to be treated like a normal person. There was a pause, and I felt uncomfortable overhearing their conversation. But I also couldn't help but understand both sides. Kieran was clearly a caring sister who was worried about Linda's isolation. But Linda was right that being treated like a charity case wasn't helping her feel better about herself. They came back into the kitchen, and Karen's expression had softened somewhat. I'm sorry, she said to me. I didn't mean to be rude. I just worry about Linda. She's been through a lot. I understand, I said. It's nice that she has family. Who cares about her? Too much sometimes. Linda said with a small smile directed at her sister. Karen sighed. Maybe, but can you blame me? You went through a horrible divorce. You're living alone for the first time in decades, and you've been so isolated. I just want you to be happy. I know, and I'm working on it. Are you? Because you turned down dinner at Mom and Dad's last Sunday. You won't come to book club with me, and you haven't returned my calls this week. I've been busy. I did return your calls 2 days later. I could see this conversation heading toward an argument, and I sensed that Linda's relationship with her well-meaning but overprotective sister was part of the isolation problem. You know what I said, standing up? I should probably get going. Thank you for the cider, Linda. It was delicious. You don't have to leave, Linda said quickly. I know, but I have some paperwork to catch up on tonight. I looked at Karen. It was nice meeting you. Take care of each other. As I was getting ready to leave, Linda walked me to the door. Sorry about that, she said quietly. Karen means well, but she doesn't understand that her constant worry makes me feel worse, not better. She loves you. That's not a bad thing. No, but it's complicated. Everyone in my family sees me as the victim of my divorce, the one who needs to be taken care of. Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning in their concern. I understood what she meant. Well-intentioned family members could sometimes make it harder to move forward, especially when they were so focused on protecting you from further hurt, that they inadvertently kept you stuck in the role of the wounded person. Maybe they need to see you taking care of yourself, I suggested, making your own choices, building your own life. Maybe they do. As I drove home that evening, I found myself thinking about Linda's family dynamics. Her sister's concern was genuine, but it was also part of what was keeping Linda isolated. When everyone around you is constantly worried about your well-being, it becomes hard to take risks, to put yourself out there, to do the things that might actually help you heal and grow. I also thought about how comfortable our conversation had been, how natural it felt to sit in her kitchen and talk about life. Linda was right that she needed someone who would listen to her without treating her like she was broken. But I was beginning to realize that I needed something too. In our conversations, I'd found someone who was genuinely interested in deeper topics. Someone who asked real questions and gave honest answers. The next morning, I woke up with an idea. Linda had mentioned that she used to volunteer at the food bank, that she liked helping people. She'd also talked about needing to build a community, to find her place in the world again. I made a decision that would change both of our lives, though I didn't know it at the time. I picked up my phone and called her. Linda, it's Mike. Hope I'm not calling too early? Not at all. What's going on? I have a proposition for you. There's a community center downtown that's looking for volunteers to help with their weekend meal program. They serve lunch to seniors and families who need it. I was thinking of volunteering there myself, and I wondered if you might be interested in doing it with me. There was silence on the other end of the line, and for a moment I worried I'd overstepped. You want to volunteer together? She asked finally. I thought it might be nice to do something meaningful, and maybe it would be easier to start with someone you know. That's incredibly thoughtful, Mike, but are you sure? I mean, you barely know me. I know enough. And I think we could both use some purpose in our lives beyond just work. Linda was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was soft with something that might have been hope. When do we start? Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that makes everything feel possible. I picked up Linda at 8:30, and she was waiting on her front porch with a nervous energy that reminded me of a first day of school. She'd dressed carefully in dark jeans and a burgundy sweater, and she was carrying a small tote bag that looked like it contained enough supplies for a week-long expedition. You look ready for anything, I said as she got into my truck. I might have overpacked, she admitted, settling the bag at her feet. I brought aprons, hand sanitizer, hair ties, and about 6 different types of snacks in case anyone gets hungry. The snacks are definitely going to be appreciated. The Millbrook Community Center sat on the corner of Main and 3rd Street, a brick building that had served various purposes over the decades, but had found its calling as a hub for local services. As we pulled into the parking lot, I could see people already gathering at the side entrance, some carrying covered dishes, others wheeling in cases of bottled water. There's more people here than I expected, Linda said, watching a steady stream of volunteers entering the building. Good thing, means the program is working. We walked toward the entrance together, and I noticed Linda's steps slowing slightly as we got closer to the door. She was second-guessing herself. I could tell. "Hey," I said, stopping. "We can leave any time you want." "No pressure, I know. I'm just nervous. It's been a long time since I did anything like this with new people. Then we'll take it slow." The coordinator was a woman named Betty, probably in her 60s, with silver hair and the kind of take-charge personality that made things happen. She spotted us immediately as we entered the large multi-purpose room. "You must be Mike and Linda," she said, walking over with a clipboard and a smile that could power the building. "Thank you so much for volunteering. We can always use extra hands, especially on Saturdays." She gave us a quick orientation, explaining that they served lunch from 11 to 2 every Saturday and Sunday to anyone who needed it. No questions asked. No proof of income required. Some people came because they couldn't afford groceries, others because they were elderly and isolated, still others because they were homeless or between homes. "The most important thing," Betty said, "is treating everyone with dignity. Some of our guests are going through the hardest times of their lives. A kind word and a smile might be the best part of their day." Linda nodded seriously, absorbing every word, like she was studying for an exam. We were assigned to work the serving line, ladling out portions of beef stew, mashed potatoes, and green beans onto plates. The setup was efficient but warm, with round tables covered in cheerful tablecloths and volunteers circulating to chat with guests and refill drinks. The first hour passed in a blur of activity. Linda threw herself into the work with an intensity that surprised me. She remembered every guest's name after hearing it once, asked thoughtful questions about their lives, and somehow managed to make each interaction feel personal despite the steady stream of people coming through the line.
"Linda,
"You're a natural." "At this," said Janet, another volunteer who'd been working the program for 3 years. "Have you done community service work before?" "A little, but it's been a while," Linda replied, wiping down the serving counter between guests. I'd forgotten. How good it feels to be useful. Around noon, an elderly man named Frank approached our station. He was probably in his 70s, neatly dressed despite clearly worn clothing. And he moved with the careful dignity of someone trying to maintain pride in difficult circumstances. "Good afternoon, Frank," Linda said warmly. "How are you today?" "Better now that I'm here," he replied with a smile that transformed his whole face. "You folks always brighten up my weekend." As Linda served his plate, Frank mentioned that he'd been a mechanic for 40 years before retiring, and that led to a conversation about cars and repairs that somehow included me, Linda, and 2 other volunteers. Frank's eyes lit up as he talked about rebuilding engines and the satisfaction of fixing something that was broken. "That's exactly how I feel about plumbing," I said. "There's something satisfying about solving a problem and leaving things better than you found them." "Precisely," Frank said. "Though I have to say, these days I'm more often the one needing things fixed than doing the fixing." Linda looked at Frank thoughtfully. "Maybe, but you're sharing your knowledge and experience with all of us." "A different kind of fixing." Frank's smile grew even wider. "Young lady, you have a way with words." After Frank moved to find a table, Linda turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before. There was something alive in her face, an energy that hadn't been there during any of our previous conversations. "This is incredible," she said quietly. "I feel like myself again, like I have something to offer." "You always had something to offer. You just needed the right place to offer it." The afternoon continued with a steady rhythm of serving, cleaning, and talking with guests. Linda gravitated toward the older visitors, listening to their stories with genuine interest and somehow managing to remember details from their previous conversations. Mrs. Rodriguez told her about her granddaughter's graduation. Linda asked follow-up questions that showed she'd been paying attention. Mr. Thompson shared his concerns about his apartment's heating system, and Linda suggested he speak with me about possible solutions. "You're building relationships here," I observed, during a brief lull in activity. "I know, it's incredible. I work with the same folks every single day, but we barely scratch the surface of real conversation. But here, people are opening up their hearts to me." By 2 in the afternoon, We were wrapping things up when Betty walked over to us. You know, what? You two have been absolutely fantastic today. I've had guests coming up to me all afternoon telling me how welcomed you made them feel. We want to do this again next Saturday. Linda jumped in, then looked my way. I mean, if you're up for it, Mike, count me in. Looks like we just found ourselves a new weekend tradition. As we headed to the parking lot, Frank hurried to catch up with us. Hey, Linda, Mike, hold up a second, he called out. I just wanted to say thanks for today. I've been coming to these meals for half a year now, and trust me, I can spot volunteers who are just checking boxes. You too. You actually give a damn, and it shows. Frank, that really touches my heart, Linda said, her voice getting shaky. You have no idea how much that means. No, thank you. You reminded this old guy that decent people still exist. People who see me as Frank, not just another charity case. After Frank headed off, Linda looked at me with tears streaming down. Her face, Mike, I swear this has been the best day I've had in forever. How come? For the first time since everything fell apart with my marriage, I actually felt useful. Not as somebody's wife or mom or the person everyone worries about. Just me. Just Linda doing something that matters. During the drive home, Linda was like a completely different person. She couldn't stop talking about everyone we'd met, all the stories people had shared, the real connections we'd made. But what really got to me was hearing her talk about wanting to do more, maybe joining their weeknight dinner service, getting involved with their Christmas and Thanksgiving programs. Betty was telling me about their reading program and these community gardens they run, she said. I'd love to help with the gardens. God, I miss getting my hands dirty with plants. Sounds like this really clicked for you. Maybe it did. Maybe this was always meant to happen. She stared out at the houses we were passing. You know what's crazy? This morning, I was a nervous wreck, worried about screwing up or not being helpful enough. But the second I stopped obsessing over myself and started paying attention to the people I was there to serve, all that anxiety just disappeared. That's how it usually goes, really? I had no clue. I've spent the last few years so wrapped up in my own mess, the divorce drama, feeling sorry for myself, being lonely, that I completely forgot there's this whole world full of people who could actually use what I have to offer. We sat in her driveway for a minute after I parked, neither of us in a rush to end the conversation. Mike, can I ask you something? Shoot. Why did you really invite me to come with you today? I had to think about that one. I wanted to be straight with her, honestly, because I could tell you were struggling, and I figured maybe we could help each other get our heads above water. You were struggling too. In my own way, yeah. I've been stuck in this rut. Work, go home, crash, repeat. Today showed me there's actually more to life than just getting by. Linda sat with that for a moment, so we both got something out of it. Definitely. Does this make us actual friends now? Like for real? I'm hoping so. Her whole face lit up with this genuine smile I'd never seen before. Perfect. It's because I was thinking about cooking dinner tomorrow, and it would be really nice to make a meal for someone other than just me. I'd love that. As Linda was getting out of my truck, she stopped and turned back. Mike, remember what I told you the other day about not being held in years? Think I was asking the wrong thing. What do you mean? I was so fixated on romantic stuff, being held by a man, that kind of touch, that I missed all the other ways people can reach you. Today, Frank grabbed my hand when he thanked us. Mrs. Rodriguez hugged me goodbye. Betty put her hand on my back while she was showing me something. I'm not as starved for human contact as I thought. I was just hunting for it in all the wrong spots. That's a good realization. It is. But Mike, the other part of what I said about wondering if I'm too old or too complicated for someone to want to be close to me romantically, that question is still there. And what do you think the answer is now? Linda was quiet for a moment, considering. I think maybe the answer doesn't matter as much as I thought it did. If I can build a life full of meaningful connections and purposeful work, if I can remember who I am outside of being someone's partner, then whether or not I find romantic love becomes less desperate and more hopeful. That sounds like wisdom. Feels like the beginning of wisdom anyway. That night, as I sat in my own quiet house, I reflected on the day. Linda wasn't the only one who'd been transformed by our experience at the community center. Watching her come alive as she connected with people, seeing her natural compassion and strength emerge when she had somewhere to direct it. had shown me something important about the power of service and community. But more than that, it had shown me something about Linda herself. She wasn't broken or pitiable or someone who needed to be rescued. She was someone who'd been temporarily lost and was finding her way back to herself. And somehow, in helping her find that path, I discovered that I'd been a little lost too. Tomorrow's dinner would be more than just a meal between friends. It would be a celebration of rediscovery of two people who'd found something valuable in each other's company and in their shared commitment to making a difference in their community. Sunday evening found me standing on Linda's front porch with a bottle of wine and an unexpected case of nerves. In the week since our volunteer experience, something had shifted between us. Our conversations had deepened, our friendship had solidified, and I found myself looking forward to seeing her with an anticipation that went beyond casual friendship. Linda answered the door wearing a simple black dress that I'd never seen before. Her hair loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back in her usual practical ponytail. She looked radiant in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or clothing, and everything to do with the confidence that seemed to emanate from within. "Perfect timing," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "Dinner's almost ready." The house smelled incredible, like garlic and herbs, and something that had been simmering. Slowly, all afternoon, she'd set the dining room table with candles and cloth napkins, and soft jazz was playing from somewhere in the background. "This is beautiful," I said, looking around. "You didn't have to go to all this trouble. I wanted to. It's been ages since I cooked for someone I actually wanted to spend time with." Settled into dinner conversation that flowed as naturally as breathing. Linda told me about a call she'd received from Betty, asking if she'd consider coordinating the community center's new holiday meal program. I shared stories from my week of service calls, including an elderly woman who'd tried to fix her own toilet and ended up flooding her bathroom. "You know what I realized this week?" Linda said, refilling our wine glasses. "I've been living like a guest in my own life for the past 2 years. Being polite, staying out of the way, not making waves or asking for too much. And now, I want to be the host of my own life. I want to make decisions, take up space, have opinions that matter." As we finished dinner and moved to the living room with coffee, the conversation turned more personal. Linda curled up on one end of the couch, her legs tucked beneath her, looking more relaxed than I'd ever seen her. "Hey, can I tell you something? That might sound strange." "Everything you tell me sounds perfectly reasonable." She laughed softly. "That night when I asked you about being 48, about whether it was pathetic that I hadn't been held in years, I was really asking you to tell me I still had value, that I wasn't invisible. You were never invisible, Linda. Well, maybe not to you, but I felt invisible to myself. Now, do you know what I mean?" I nodded, understanding more than she probably realized. "When did that change?" "Yesterday, at the community center. When Frank thanked us, when Mrs. Rodriguez hugged me, when Betty asked me to take on more responsibility. I realized I'd been waiting for someone else to validate my worth instead of creating it myself. That's a powerful realization. It is. And it's changed how I think about everything, including what I want from life going forward." Linda set down her coffee cup and looked at me directly. "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me, okay? When you invited me to volunteer with you, was it because you felt sorry for me? Because you thought I was pathetic and needed saving?" The question caught me off guard with its directness. "No, Linda, it wasn't pity." "Then what was it?" I took a moment to consider my answer, wanting to get it right. It was recognition. "I saw someone who had lost her way, but wasn't broken. I saw someone with compassion and intelligence who just needed the right opportunity to shine. And honestly, I saw someone I wanted to spend time with." "Wanted to spend time with," she repeated thoughtfully. "It's not felt obligated to spend time with. Definitely wanted to." Linda was quiet for a moment, and I could see her processing this information, integrating it with her new understanding of herself. "Mike, I need to tell you something else. Something important. I'm listening. I'm attracted to you. Not just as a friend, but as a man. And I know that might complicate things, but I needed to say it because I'm done hiding from my feelings or pretending they don't matter." Her honesty took my breath away, not because it was unexpected, but because of the courage it took for her to say it aloud. Linda, wait, let me finish. I know you might not feel the same way, and that's okay. Our friendship matters more to me than anything else. But I realize that part of reclaiming my life means being honest about what I want, even if it's scary. What do you want? I want to see where this goes between us. Not because I'm desperate or lonely or looking for someone to rescue me, but because I genuinely care about you, and I think we could build something beautiful together. I moved closer to her on the couch, close enough to see the vulnerability. In her eyes, mixed with newfound strength, Linda, I've been attracted to you since the first day I met you, not just physically, but to your kindness, your intelligence, your resilience. I didn't say anything because I wasn't sure if you were ready, if it would complicate things. And now I think we're both ready to be honest about what this is. I reached out and took her hand, intertwining our fingers. Her hand was warm and steady, and she didn't pull away. So what is this? She asked softly. I think it's two people who found each other at exactly the right time, who helped each other remember who they really are. Linda leaned closer, and I could smell her perfume. Something light and floral that suited her perfectly. Mike, would you kiss me? Not because I'm desperate or because I haven't been held in years, but because I want you to. Because I want to kiss you. Instead of answering with words, I cupped her face gently in my hands and kissed her. It was soft and sweet and full of promise, the kind of kiss that speaks of new beginnings rather than desperate endings. When we broke apart, Linda's eyes were bright with unshed tears. That was worth waiting for, she whispered. The beginning of something good, I agreed. 6 months later, Linda and I were sitting in the same community center where our friendship had deepened into love. But this time we were being honored as Volunteers of the Year. Linda had indeed taken over coordination of the holiday meal program. And under her leadership, it had expanded to serve twice as many families. I had started a small home repair program for elderly and low-income residents, teaching basic maintenance skills while providing free services. As we sat at the head table, watching the crowd of people we'd come to know and care about, Linda leaned over and whispered in my ear. A year ago, if someone had told me that fixing a water heater would lead to all this, I would have thought they were crazy. What would you have thought was crazy about it? That I could be this happy, that I could feel this valuable, that I could fall in love again and have it be healthy and mutual and built on friendship. I squeezed her hand under the table. What do you think now? Now I think that sometimes the best things in life come disguised as ordinary Tuesday afternoons and broken appliances.
Oh.
During the ceremony, when Linda was called up to receive her award, she spoke about the power of community and service to transform lives. But what struck me most was how she carried herself, with a confidence and joy that radiated from someone who had found her place in the world. Later that night, as we sat on her front porch with Rusty purring between us, Linda asked me a question that had become our running joke. Mike, do you think a 49-year-old woman who runs community programs and dates a handyman is pathetic? I think she's extraordinary, I said, kissing the top of her head. And I think she's exactly where she's supposed to be. With you? With herself? Everything else is just bonus. Linda tilted her head to look at me. That's the right answer. I'm a quick learner. As we sat there in the comfortable silence of people who had found their way to each other and to themselves, I reflected on how much had changed since. That first day I'd knocked on her door to fix a water heater. We'd both been a little lost, a little lonely, a little uncertain about what came next. But sometimes the most important repairs aren't to appliances or pipes or broken fixtures. Sometimes they're two hearts and hopes and the belief that it's never too late to build the life you actually want. Linda had taught me that healing doesn't always look like dramatic transformation. Sometimes it looks like small acts of service, honest conversations, and the courage to ask for what you need. And sometimes it looks like two people choosing to build something together, one day at a time. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.